in dark places. All for freedom, freedom for all. It's springtime and the flowers are starting to bloom out and the birds are singing and it's just happy, warm feelings all around. I think it's high time we take us a road trip. But here's what's going on in the news this week. Oh, If I Could Talk to the Aliens by Colleen Walsh, Harvard staff writer. Thanks, Colleen. In Steven Spielberg's 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, extraterrestrials communicate with humans through a catchy 5-note sequence. In Spielberg's 1982 blockbuster E.T., an alien learns about basic English from a children's TV show. More recently, in 2016's Arrival, squid-like visitors use pictograms to make themselves understood to American scientists wielding whiteboards with words. But what would really happen if we made direct contact with an alien species? How would we recognize or interpret their intelligence? Or what would we say? Those were just some of the questions discussed during wide-ranging conversation Monday afternoon. Using Arrival as a springboard, panelist Jesse Stedaker, a professor of psychology and expert in language comprehension, and A.V. Loeb, an anthropologist, author of Extraterrestrial, The First Signs of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, 2021, examined the potential challenges we might face. Loeb has long argued the search for alien life should be taken more seriously in scientific circles. He said there are a range of factors to consider should we encounter an alien race. First, humans must try to conquer their sense that they are at the pinnacle of creation, and instead understand that they are instead likely somewhere in the middle of the distribution of intelligences in the Milky Way galaxy. Earth's inhabitants also have to be mindful of the technological gap that likely will exist between the human race and a messenger from beyond the solar system. Given a possible wide knowledge gap, we should also be prepared for the possibility that aliens may not want to communicate with us at all, said Loeb, just as we have no desire to communicate with ants on the sidewalk. Still, if we were able to directly engage, as the Arrival scientists do, the challenge becomes how. Such a process would differ greatly from the search for alien life in the past years, said Loeb, when people imagined any contact would likely come in the form of radio signals with extraterrestrials, which may have taken thousands of years to arrive. In Arrival, actor Amy Adams, who plays a linguist, tries to recreate the child language learning situation with the aliens by offering basic words to describe people and their actions, all while assuming the aliens' conceptualization is reasonably similar to our own, Snyder said. But if those concepts weren't available to that other species, it's unclear what any of those words would map onto, she said. Still, Snyder said she is optimistic that we might share some broad-level constructs with intelligent aliens who might also be the product of biological evolution. But wait, there's more. Here is the Nicolas Cage meltdown of the week.
Well, as long as there's a Tojo and a Hitler out there, we have to keep on fighting. Is that understood?
You're not hearing me.
I'm hearing you just fine. Now, there's a war going on worldwide. And they ain't being waged on your wants and wishes. Now, you get some sack time. That's an order. I can't do it! I can't perform my duty!
This week, we're taking another road trip into the unknown. This time we're going all the way down to Texas. Texas is the 28th state of the United States. It was admitted into the Union on December 29th, 1845. It's a big state down in the south central region of the United States. So there's going to be a ton of cool stories coming out of this big state. And we're actually coming up on the first stop right now. And here to start us off, my pal Jimmy Haunted.
Let's pull over to the side of the road and visit the Bragg/Ghost Road in Saratoga, Texas. Now, this story here starts deep in the big thicket of East Texas. A former railroad spur affords visitors a glimpse of the bobbing, shimmering light of Saratoga, which seems to approach, bounce, and change color before disappearing. It's one of several ghost lights or spook lights that appear without an obvious source of explanation, often surrounded by a unique regional mythology involving ghosts, extraterrestrials, or Native American folklore. According to local legend, the light on Bragg Road is the ghostly lantern of an unfortunate railroad employee. Decapitated in a wreck, his spirit now walks the road nightly, eternally searching for his head. According to skeptics, it's the headlights and taillights passing on an adjacent highway that meets the road at just the right angle to produce a strangely shifting light through the trees. Finished in 1904, the road was cut to connect by rail the now abandoned boomtown of Bragg to the still surviving community of Saratoga. The rails are now gone, and the road is now a well-kept 8-mile dirt drive maintained as a park by Hardin County. Weather-beaten signs at each end of the road give a history of the road and its surrounds, describing the booming oil fields and sawmills that once brought railroads sprawling through this wild place. The road is a ruler straight and lined with tall pines and cypress, and the overhanging canopy creates a leafy tunnel that is cool and shady during the day and oppressively dark at night. Peeping frogs and fireflies charm the air after sundown. Whatever explanation one prefers, a lost soul eternally searching, swinging his ancient carbide lamp through the swamp, or a big rig's halogen lights refracting down a country road, a drive down Bragg Road is an eerie thrill. If one peers into the vast big thicket darkness and imagines the bustle and promise of this once busy industrial corridor, the spring peepers duetting with the whistles of trains, the bobbing lanterns of signalmen walking the old tracks, Bragg Road can certainly put the spook in spooklight. The Ghost of Bragg Road.
If you've ever found yourself driving along Farm to Market Road 666, you probably felt chills rolling down your spine as you traveled the dark country road at night. There's a reason why. The highway is located in one of the most famous haunted areas in South Texas. Along the country road sits the old San Patricio Courthouse, where Chapita Rodriguez, the first woman ever to be hung in Texas, was sentenced for a crime she did not commit. Chapita was taken to a grove of trees along the Nueces River, a few miles behind the courthouse and the present-day highway, and hanged from the tallest oak tree. She was buried in a coffin along the banks of the river, under the tree from which she was hanged. Chapita's ghost reportedly glides on the riverbanks, where her cries echo into the mesquite. You've heard of the Headless Horseman from Washington Irving's short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but what if we told you there was a similar story in South Texas? What would you do then? According to urban legend, a wealthy Kentuckian who had come to Texas for a land purchase in the early 1800s found the quaint town of San Patricio to be his last stop. It is said that the wealthy man lost his gold to thieves and also his head. He reportedly roams the night along Headless Horseman Hill, which flows from Mathis to San Patricio. and this is El Muerto. The story goes that a man named Vidal, a Mexican bandit and horse thief, stole horses from the ranch of Texas Ranger Creed Taylor in 1848. He soon discovered the horses were missing, and he took off with a neighbor who had also lost horses in order to find the thieves. They both ran into Bigfoot Wallace near Uvalde, and he agreed to join in the hunt. Also a ranger, he had a lot of experience and little forgiveness when it came to horse thieves. Soon after their search began, they found the horse thief had killed all the horses. Bigfoot cut off Vidal's head and mounted his body firmly on the saddle of a wild Mustang. He also put his decapitated head in a sombrero and secured it with a strap, attaching it to the saddle. The wild Mustang roamed South Texas, scaring everyone who encountered it. The duo was named El Muerto and was blamed for all sorts of misfortunes. A small group untied the man from the saddle, freeing the horse from his grisly rider. Though the corpse was shot many times with both bullets and arrows and buried in a small cemetery, people still claim to see a headless horseman wandering the plains late at night.
Baby Head Cemetery. Sitting near a mountain that once shared its bizarre name, the Baby Head Cemetery is the final remnant of an entire community that based its name on a grisly atrocity for some reason. As the story goes, it was sometime around the 1950s or 70s, depending on who you talk to, that a group of American Indians, looking to scare off the encroaching white settlers, kidnapped a young girl from one of the families. The girl was supposedly killed and her head placed on a spike at the foot of what was almost instantly dubbed Baby Head Mountain. While the exact details of this tale differ, the name of the mountain stuck, and when the community began to grow in the area near the turn of the century, it too became known as Baby Head. The tiny town of Baby Head grew to a respectable size, establishing a post office, a school, courthouse, multiple businesses. However, as time went on, the seemingly promising community began to dwindle, dropping to a small rural settlement with a population of about 20 people. It is not known if this was the result of being named Baby Head. Eventually, the name was abandoned and the remaining population was absorbed into the city of Llano, Texas. Today, the only remnant of the Baby Head settlement is this small cemetery, which still bears the name and possibly its grimmest association yet. The graveyard contains a few dozen graves, with some burials as recent as 2000. A historical marker has been placed at the edge of the cemetery, and it's not uncommon to see baby doll heads hanging from the sign. Baby Head Cemetery. Probably the creepiest cemetery name I ever heard.
The Donkey Lady. The Donkey Lady is said to haunt the woman Hollering Creek in Seguin between Houston and San Antonio. A young woman had been in a fire supposedly started by her husband, and she lost her 2 children in the fire. The woman became terribly disfigured, her skin drooping and her fingers turning into dark stumps, or hooves. Instead of a horse head, she was given a donkey head, and some people have reported seeing her along the creek, angry and looking for revenge. One person claimed that the deformed creature even climbed on top of their hood and smashed their windshield, all while screaming and snarling in rage. I have questions. This one's called La Chusa. Originating from Hispanic folklore, a lechuza is a witch who sold her soul to the devil for magical powers, or, by some accounts, is the spirit of a woman who has been murdered. When La Lechuza hunts at night, it looks like a harpy from Greek mythology, having a bird, human body, and a woman's face. The legend of Lechusa vastly differs depending on who you ask, but even just hearing the shape-shifting witch is said to be an omen that someone in your family will die.
This is the Hotel Galvez, also known as the Queen of the Gulf. And this is in Galveston. Galveston was once the most populous city in Texas, a booming commercial center with nationwide prominence. However, as chilling natural disasters and other events began sweeping through the coastal metropolis, the population began to decline. Ever since Hurricane Ike, which whittled the city's then 57,000 residents down to 48,000, hit in 2008, Galveston has tried to revitalize its small-town allure with new enterprises. But this isn't the city's first reawakening. After a devastating hurricane in 1900, Galveston attempted to reinvigorate its tourist appeal with Hotel Galvez, a beautiful building bearing features straight from the Spanish colonial era. Though the place is a product of the past, its eerie backstory has produced specters rumored to haunt the grounds to this day. The most infamous spirit reported here is Audra, a bride-to-be in the 1950s who stayed in room 501 while her fiancé was out at sea. When she heard his ship had gone down and all hands were lost, she hanged herself in her room. In a twist, her fiancé actually survived the wreck and came back to the Galvez only to find his betrothed dead. Dead, dead, dead. Guests and employees both report feeling the presence of the forlorn lover and doors slamming shut in the middle of the night. Strange smells and visions of orbs are all common occurrences.
He is the ultimate threat that keeps children from misbehaving. And the boogeyman, well, he doesn't even come close to the hideous creature of the night known as El Chusey. The beast is known by different names to people throughout Latin America. Some of the names include Chusey, Coco, Cuco, Camucho, and others. Popular legend describes Chusey as a small humanoid with glowing red eyes that hides in closets or under the bed. He's childlike and somewhere between life and death. Tony Zavaleta, an anthropology professor from Texas Southmost College, said the shadow figure is a common myth passed between parent and child, according to a 2005 article from the Brownsville Herald. Zavaleta said fathers traditionally tell children that there's nothing under the bed or the closet, while mothers tell the children to fear Cuche. Pre-industrial societies create a conceptual fear creature to keep children away from dangerous places, he said. These legends often continue as civilization develops and new names are assigned to it. The Chuche is ours. There are reports of Chusey sightings in places such as Dickens, San Benito, Brownsville, and San Antonio. O. Henry's Cursed Treasure Hunt. Beneath the light of a midnight moon in 1894, writer O. Henry, William Sidney Porter, and his friends crept through the woods along Shoal Creek in search of a buried treasure with a cursed reputation. Hidden along the bank by two thieves in 1836, it represented the entire payroll for Santa Anna's Mexican army in Texas. One thief had supposedly murdered the other and drained his blood over the treasure's burial ground to create a patron or ghostly guard. O. Henry set forth to find it, undeterred by its ill repute, but ran away when he heard screams emanating from the woods. Discovering the shrieks came from a man who'd escaped a nearby asylum, the writer returned for several more fruitless attempts. Although denied any pilfered wealth, he had earned a priceless story.
I'm searching haunted cemeteries in Texas, trying to find some good ones, and a lot of them are pretty generic. People see lights here and there. Some local psychics claim there's some energy in some of them. And you know what I do immediately? I jump to the comments, because that's when the locals tell you the good stuff. So on this list right here, I'd like to thank Patrick Jones, who suggested Bowie Park in Stamford, Texas. That's not even on the list. That has a really great story. So thanks, Patrick Jones, for suggesting this next story. The Hatchet Lady is a scary urban legend about a ghostly woman that haunts lovers' lanes and preys on kissing couples. Some say she appears in Red Rocks in Denver, Colorado. Others claim she visits Illinois, Albany, New York, or Bowie Park in Stamford, Texas. Back in the 1880s, there was a beautiful young woman who was engaged to be married to a local man. The night before the wedding, she caught him cheating on her with another woman. She flew into a furious rage and grabbed a hatchet. She brutally attacked him, swinging the hatchet until all of her rage was spent and she had hacked him to pieces. Ever since then, they say the Hatchet Lady haunts lovers' lanes. If a young couple happen to be out at midnight, the Hatchet Lady becomes infuriated and is likely to appear. They say she is a haggard old woman with dark black eyes, and she carries a hatchet in her hand that is covered with blood. One night, a teenage boy decided to play a prank on his girlfriend. It was supposed to be a joke. He got one of his friends to dress as the Hatchet Lady with a wig, a black cloak, and a hatchet covered in red paint. The teenager was going to take his girlfriend and another young couple and drive out to where the Hatchet Lady was supposed to appear. The plan was that when they got there, the boy's friend was supposed to jump out of the bushes in the creepy costume and scare everyone. The two young couples showed up and parked the car in the deserted lover's lane. It was after midnight, and they waited for something to happen. The teenage boy shouted out the Hatchet Lady's name 9 times. Just then, a shadowy figure emerged from the trees. As it came closer, they saw that it was an old woman with black eyes, and she was holding a hatchet. The boy was laughing because his girlfriend and the others were scared out of their wits. His window was down, and his arm was leaning on it. All of a sudden, the woman swung her hatchet and hacked off his arm. Everyone in the car was spattered with the blood. They managed to get away, and doctors at the local hospital managed to save the boy's life. They said his girlfriend went insane and spent some time in a mental hospital. The other couple in the back seat were extremely traumatized. As it turned out, the friend who was supposed to play the prank on them was found dead in the bushes. They say he had been dead for hours before any of this had happened. I don't know, is this true or not? Either way, it's a good story.
Lake Buchanan. All lakes have secrets, things buried in their depths that remain unknown to those joyfully swimming in laps on the surface. Lake Buchanan is no different, harboring the abandoned buildings and cemetery of Old Bluffton at the bottom of its waters. Unlike Friendship, the town buried under Granger Lake, the residents of Old Bluffton had no time to relocate their cemetery after Buchanan Dam was built in 1937. A flash flood filled the lake and residents were forced to abandon everything. Only during severe droughts does the lake reveal the names of its dead, as they show through the shallow depths on each perfectly preserved tombstone. Shoal Creek. A long and shallow creek winds through the center of modern-day Austin. Its adjacent park, a family-friendly playground to disc golfers and drum circles, but beneath its wooded canopy lies something far more sinister, namely the ghosts of lost bodies. Large mounds of mass graves once loomed over Shoal Creek, containing sacred burials of the Tonkawa that once inhabited this land. But these are not the graves that still haunt us. No, the spirits seen to hikers along the trail come from those lost in the wake of murder and plague, buried quickly in shallow graves. Native American clashes in the 1840s with people who settled on land beyond Austin's original western border resulted in a bloody history that seems to only focus on one man, Gideon White. Despite the obvious dangers, White situated his family home by the creek and paid a fatal price during the Shoal Creek Massacre of 1842, a dramatic moniker for a fight between him and a Native American warrior. While White is now buried in Austin's Oakwood Cemetery, his murdered foe was dumped in an unmarked grave along the creek. Some claim to have seen their ghosts as though hunting each other beyond the veil, leaving frigid air in their wake as tangible proof that their fight isn't over. Disease also cursed Shoal Creek when George Custer and his troops camped in the woods during Reconstruction in 1865. Cholera killed as many as 40 men, and hasty burials along the bank meant many were unaccounted for when they exhumed the bodies years later. Even today, human bones have periodically emerged in the wake of storms, but after centuries of violence, one wonders how many more lie beneath, hidden in the mud.
All right, Junebug, pull right over here. We're going to check out this possibly haunted cemetery in Huntsville, Texas. Pull right over here on the... Junebug! Oh my God. Is everybody okay?
Goodness. Hit a banana peel back there.
Well, that's going to leave a mark. This location is called Martha Chapel in Huntsville, Texas. And there's a big history to this cemetery. But recently, a creepy figure was spotted in a Google Maps street view of this Texas cemetery. Two strange images were spotted in a Google Maps street view of a cemetery in Huntsville, Texas. I just said that. What appears to be a little girl can be seen peeking her head out from behind a tree. If that wasn't enough to creep you out, over her shoulder in the distance, beyond the fence, is a tall black figure wearing what looks like a long cloak. And these images grabbed headlines on Express and the Daily Star after a video of the street view was uploaded to YouTube August 25th. The video has since been viewed nearly 300,000 times and has some people wondering if the cemetery is haunted. So go check that out. It's called Martha Chapel. Google Maps Street View, I guess. I haven't checked it out yet. But like I said, these internet sites list all these haunted cemeteries in Texas, and this one wasn't listed on the top 10, top 8, top 5 list, and we took one of the comments underneath the list to get me here. So anyway, this is one person's experience there from May 2021. So my son and a few of his friends told me they were going to this place one night. I said, okay, I'll go with you all to make sure you stay out of trouble. We took 2 vehicles. It was about 8 people total. As we get close to the road the cemetery is on, we see a couple houses with a couple lights on. But it was close to midnight during the week, so we figured people that live here might be sleeping, so we drove a little slow on this dirt road with the window down. As we drive, I hear someone yell something, so I told my son to call his friends and tell them to be quiet. People live here. His friend said they are being quiet because they want to hear if someone yells or something. About that time, I hear someone yell, "Get out of my yard!" We keep looking as we drive. We drive to try and see who said it or possibly see someone running away. Then we finally get to the cemetery. A couple other cars are there, so we get out and start looking around. One car leaves, then a few minutes later, the other leaves. Me and a couple others stay by the vehicles, and I decide to write on the car as a joke to spook them. We finally leave, and something big hits the side of our vehicle in front of us as we drive by. It was a big black bird, possibly an owl, and it made a loud scream. So we finally meet up at the closest gas station and start talking about what we all had seen and everything. Someone noticed some writing on both vehicles, and one of the friends said, yes, he did that. But I only wrote on one vehicle, and I wrote, go away. But something else wrote, leave now, on both vehicles. This place is a little scary, and I'm not going to lie, so be careful if you ever go there. And here's one story from Alexandra W. I just wanted to start off by saying we have visited the cemetery more than once, around 4 times. One of the times I went with my boyfriend and his brother and a few friends. We were all standing in the back of the newer cemetery, and we heard what sounded like something running up on us. But no big deal. After that, I could hear what sounded like a growling sound. To say the least, this stuff follows you home. That night we got back, my trash can lid flew off, and I could hear a female's voice in my daughter's room, as well as a peculiar blue light we saw that night in my hallway. The last time we didn't see much till the end, when I and a few other people who showed up seen a tall, dark-figured man lurking in the corner of the old cemetery, who seemed to be following my brother and my boyfriend's brother. The vibe I got from that dude was no less than evil. When we got back to our house, my TV was turning up on its own, and my downstairs Google was playing music. This finally stopped after putting crosses up, but if you don't want this stuff following you home, I wouldn't recommend going. Well, you just keep on going there, Alexandra. So that's called Martha Chapel, Huntsville, Texas. Is everybody okay? Dust yourself off. We're getting back in the bus.
Hope everybody's okay. Jacob's Well. Sometimes it's the silence of a place that frightens us. Other times it's the dark. Jacob's Well, a natural spring in Wimberley, has both. At the bottom of a 30-foot drop lie harrowing chambers that extend almost 140 feet deep and are fraught with danger. Dead-end tunnels and loose gravel have claimed the lives of divers who ignored the history of those that never returned from the abyss, only some of whom were ever found. Native Americans once thought elemental spirits lived in the well. Many now believe that the spirits are the ghosts of numerous divers that have drowned in the quiet darkness below. Redbud Owl. Nestled in the middle of the Colorado River is an island that Austin pet lovers know well. A special place where dogs can frolic in the water or walk off leash. What most people don't realize is that the island was created from the remnants of tragedy, formed from debris of homes swept away in the flood of 1900. 15 years later, a second flood added to the unnatural formation. Since those events, many Austinites have claimed the orbs of light that dance below the water at night are the souls lost in the cataclysmic storms. Not orbs. Moore's Crossing. By day, Moore's Crossing is a pedestrian bridge used by hikers and bicyclists. By night, the ghosts of the floods that swept through Onion Creek in 1915 and 1921 are said to lurk in the trees that surround it. There are disembodied voices reported by many local residents. Perhaps most disturbing is that of a white man hung for his relationship with an African American woman. Not only have many seen him swinging from the rafters, but they also say you can still hear the noose scraping against the metal.
Looking to become a real vampire? It's time to move to Texas. And the story's by Marina Watts. Thanks, Marina. Texas is known for many things: barbecue, the Alamo, and vampires. Real-life vampire communities, known as courts, are popular in the Lone Star State. These communities may sound grotesque and scary, but the truth is they are incredibly philanthropic and even welcoming to outsiders. Friendly vampires. We celebrate the dark, the macabre, macabre, and the spooky, and we recognize that it's part of culture throughout history. Michael Cage, king of the Houston Vampire Court since 2017. Houston Vampire Court will be abbreviated to HVC for the rest of this story. No matter how weird or how spooky you think your passions or ideas are, you have a place where you're not judged for it. Cage discovered this community while scoping out the goth nightclub scene and meeting folks who had an affinity for all things vampire and spooky. But what does it mean to realize you're a vampire, you may ask? And it's not just a phase? When someone realizes they identify as a vampire, the universal moment is the awakening, which is the moment they also call coming out of the coffin. Cage reveals that this moment usually happens around puberty, but can occur later in life. These real-life vampires aren't like Dracula and are incomparable to the Twilight Saga's Cullen family. Cage said that those fictitious creatures are just mopey superheroes that sparkle in the sunlight. Courts themselves have different vibes. The HVC is more of a punk rock scene, while the Dallas-Fort Worth Vampire Court, VCD, has more of an artistic focus, according to members, so there's something for everyone. Charity work seems the best way to utilize the amount of unique talent inside and outside of our membership, as well provide those needed opportunities for giving. Danielle Kowal, a media representative and member of the VCD, they benefit the city and community by creating art, culture, and music while supporting local causes. Blood drives, children with medical needs, heart research, exotic animal shelters, domestic abuse prevention are among the causes the VCD has benefited. The HVC, meanwhile, has been highly successful in their annual drive to pay off student lunch debts. Are you sold on moving to Texas and becoming a vampire? In order to join these vampire communities, you can apply for membership in the designated city. You can also keep an eye out for charity balls thrown, such as Houston's annual Nightshade Ball and Dallas's Bleeding Hearts Ball. These gothic events include live music, drinks, and entertainment like burlesque performers and tarot card readings. Maybe the eerie celebrations will suck you right in. Now that's something I didn't know. The Texas Vampire Community.
Dead Man's Hole. There are times when people are more dangerous than poisoned gas. In Burnett County, that time was the late 1800s. The place was Dead Man's Hole. Created by a natural gas explosion, fumes still lurk in its depths. Something that prevented full scientific exploration until 1951, when gas masks could be employed. What they uncovered were 2 caves along with a number of bones. Though a historical marker accounts for 17 recovered bodies, historians say it's hard to pinpoint an exact number because of the state of the scattered remains. The one thing that can be confirmed, however, is how they got there. During the Civil War, Confederate vigilantes, known as fire eaters, hunted down those they suspected of being Union sympathizers in the area and hung them from nearby trees, later dumping their bodies in the hole. Lynched African American bodies were also discarded there for decades afterward. Though the hole is now covered today by a metal plate, those victims are said to haunt the area, creating a chilling silence with extreme cold spots capable of piercing through the scorching Texas sun. Swamp Thing. Behind the beautiful fans of palm fronds that give Palmetto State Park its tropical ambience is a swamp littered with mud, volcanoes, and alligators. In this setting, though, the vicious reptiles are the least of your worries. Visitors claim that grass and twigs move on their own, as if crushed by the weight of some lurking beast. Snapped branches have often been found in the wake of such mysterious movement. Those who have seen the monster describe it as a cross between a man and an ape, but its uncanny ability to camouflage itself has caused many to say that it's more than an invisible man. Hairy Man Road. Though a paved sidewalk and ever-encroaching construction have dwindled the primitive atmosphere of this section of Round Rock, enough of the woods that once sheltered a feral boy still remain. In the late 1800s, a flash flood swept through Brushy Creek, separating him from his fleeing family. Traumatized, he hid in the woods and lived as a hermit who frightened passers-by as he charged at them with his unusually long hair and beard. Dubbed the Hairy Man, he was sadly trampled by a speeding stagecoach. But his legacy lives on through the annual festival still held in his honor.
This story comes out of Houston. Frank Shaw's gargoyle is a bizarre monster sighted in 1986. A NASA employee had a horrifying encounter with a winged, jet-black, malevolent monstrosity, an encounter that would haunt him for the rest of his life. On a blustery evening sometime in 1986, Frank Shaw, a NASA archivist at Houston's Johnson Space Center, claimed to have had a terrifying run with a creature that seemed to hail from beyond mythology. While information regarding this case is admittedly sparse, Shaw's daughter Desiree would eventually reveal the details of this mysterious run-in to author Nick Redfern, our friend, in 2004. Desiree testified that when she realized that something was dreadfully wrong when her father returned home late one night after working at the Space Center. While neither Desiree nor her mother were particularly alarmed by Shaw's tardiness, as he was often required to work into the wee hours, they both were dismayed by his alarmingly apprehensive demeanor. The pair attempted to comfort Shaw, who was eventually able to compose himself enough to regale them with a terrifying tale of his brush with the unknown. According to Shaw, he was walking to his car at the end of the shift when he happened to glance up and see a ghastly black gargoyle-like figure perched ominously at the edge of one of the Space Center's buildings. Shaw claimed he was frozen in horror at the sight of this astounding apparition, which, according to his description, was a jet-black humanoid that seemed to have a large cape draped across its shoulders. As if that weren't bizarre enough, he claimed he saw two massive bat-like wings sticking out either side of the fabric, or wrinkled flesh, whatever it was, or what he perceived to be a cape. This description seems to bear at least a passing resemblance not only to the notorious Mothman, but also to the Owlman of Cornwall, both of which are said to be winged humanoid creatures. I like saying winged, which elicit an irrational fear in those who witness them. There is a chance that it may also be associated with the ape-face cryptid, known colloquially as the Big Bird, which terrified the residents of South Texas Rio Grande Valley just a decade previously. Shaw then told his awestruck family that not only had he seen this creature, but it had stared directly down at him. Shaw would later assert that he believed that this being actually seemed to be savoring the fact that it had managed to inspire such terror in the archivist. How Shaw came to this conclusion was not fully explained. It was at this point that the gargoyle seemed to unfurl his wings, which Shaw stated made a crackling noise as it took flight in the powerful howling gusts. The sound of the crackling wings seemed to snap Shaw out of his stupor, and he turned and sprinted toward his vehicle. In what must have been the longest moments of his life, Shaw fumbled with his keys, unlocked the door, dove inside, started the engine, and drove into the blackness of the night, too terrified to even look back to see if he was being pursued by this winged ebony atrocity. Despite what must have been some initial skepticism, Shaw's family rallied behind their patriarch, believing that his harrowing tale was not merely a flight of fancy, but the simple truth. Nevertheless, both Desiree and her mother admonished Shaw not to tell his superiors about this incident, lest his credibility, or worse yet, his sanity, be called into question. Shaw agreed with his daughter and wife, but as the days turned into weeks, he was unable to get the memory of his close encounter with his flying fiend out of his mind. Finally, Shaw decided to screw up his courage and confide in his immediate supervisor. Much to Shaw's delight, he was not met with incredulity. I know how to say this word. I'm going to get it. But anyways, incredible. Or mockery. But instead was informed that he was not the first Johnson Space Center employee to have seen this enigmatic entity skulking in the isolated areas of the station. In fact, Shaw's boss revealed that a secret file had been opened on the creature just a few months prior to Shaw's sighting. The superior stated that the file had been created in response to the gruesome deaths of 2 of the base's German shepherds. Apparently, the corpses of the hideously mutilated canines had been discovered in exactly the same area where Shaw had seen the gargoyle. Following his unusual confession, Shaw's story made it up the chain of command until it apparently came to the attention of some NASA officials who, in classic Men in Black fashion, decided to interrogate the witness. According to Desiree, her father was intensely grilled by what she referred to as NASA security people who were flown in from somewhere in Arizona. That much I know. These NASA security people made it clear to Shaw that it would be in his and his family's best interest to refrain from telling his bizarre story to anyone else. This might well explain why Desiree waited nearly 18 years to tell her father's tale. While there have been no new public reports of this entity in over 2.5 decades, which may be due in no small part to NASA's policy of silence, there seems to be a fairly good chance that this bloodthirsty gargoyle may well be lurking in the shadows of the Johnson Space Center, waiting to swoop down and strike again. Frank Shaw's Gargoyle, Houston, Texas.
This one is super scary. La Llorona. A vile monster with an innocent baby in her clutches may be the most viscerally terrifying image possible. Not only does it make every child's nightmare come true, it strikes at the heart of every parent's most primal fear. All the worse if the monster is a mother, the one person a child should be able to count on to keep him safe. La Llorona is little known outside of areas with significant Latin American population. There are many variations of this 500-year-old ghost story, but the typical version starts with Maria, whose beauty was equaled only by her vanity. She uses her wiles to marry a handsome, wealthy rancher and has 2 children. After a few happy years, the rancher takes to roaming the prairies, ignoring her while he is home, but lavishing the attention on the children. One day, while walking near the river with the children, Maria sees her husband with a wealthy lady and, in a fit of rage, throws her children into the water. But when they disappear into the water, she is seized by regret. She runs along the bank of the river, arms outstretched, in a futile attempt to get them back. The inconsolable Maria then drowns herself, or dies of grief, depending on who's telling the story, and is buried by the villagers the next morning. That night, they hear crying down by the river, Maria wailing, "Where are my children?" A woman in a long white robe, like Maria's burial dress, has been seen walking up and down the riverbank. Rechristened La Llorona from that day on, she is still sighted near rivers and oceans and other bodies of water night after dark night. So far, more tragedy than terror. In some versions, Maria is more despicable. Thinking about Daffy Duck. You're despicable. From the start, drowning her children in order to be with the man she loves and killing herself when he rejects her. The scary part comes after La Llorona reaches the gates of heaven and is not allowed in because her children aren't with her. She is trapped on earth, searching in vain for her drowned children for all eternity. As the story evolved, La Llorona resorted to kidnapping children who resemble her missing offspring, or children who disobey their parents. She has taken on banshee-like qualities, dooming those who hear her wailing to death. The tale of La Llorona echoes still more ancient mythology, going back to the Greeks. Upon discovering Zeus's affair with Lamia, Hera forces the demonic demigoddess to eat her own children. Lamia then wanders Earth and devours every child she can catch. Medea, who has 2 children with Jason the Argonaut, kills the children after Jason leaves her for another woman. But it is La Llorona whose tale has gripped generation after generation of Mexican children. They are warned that if they misbehave, La Llorona will snatch them, or that going out after dark will make her appear. Even today, many adults who grew up with the story say they believe in La Llorona.
I realized during the telling the story about Frank Shaw's Gargoyle that was supposed to be this week's installment of the Cryptid Corner, but Mr. Hunt has been slacking on his Cryptid Corner stories, so there you go. And also, there was a word in that story that I stumbled on, which I said 3 or 4 times and still couldn't figure it out. So I looked it up. I'm very tenacious. And
Incredulity.
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 So the word I was trying to say was incredulity. So thank you. So there's Frank Shaw's Gargoyle and a lesson in how to say
Incredulity.
Incredulity. Thank you.
And as we're ending the little tour of Texas and we're pulling back into the bus station right now, it's time to give some shout-outs. Our podcast shout-out of the week goes to Adam Began's Historically Haunted Show. Our very own Mr. Haunted was a guest on there a couple weeks ago on episode 15. And we also have some new listener shout-outs. We'd like to welcome Brian, Marion, Adam, Kyle, Corey, Craig, Crystal, Ross, Tony, Julie, and Troy to our growing family of listeners. Welcome aboard, guys. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. If you've got a true scary story and you'd like to be a guest on the show, send an email to indarkplacespod@hotmail.com. We'll see you again here next week. God bless you guys. This is La Llorona. 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 That's it. Llorona. This is La Llorona. Take 2.